your reaction to that verdict?
Shock.
And so here we go. Lindsay Davis from ABC interviewed Jonathan Majors on Good Morning America today in a pre-recorded interview. It was a very interesting, very good interview. I'm going to go through some of the details of some of the things that I noticed that sort of jumped out at me.
There's something about sitting here right now and looking at you and understanding the gravity of the situation.
And on previous videos, I've spoken about why I think this is a really good idea. I actually think that it would be even better idea to be interviewed by some other folks, namely Roland Martin and Shannon Sharp.
A situation that I, in many ways, put myself in.
The first thing I'll say is he made a statement with regard to not testifying because he believed that the evidence had been presented such that he didn't need to testify. Wow. That one really jumped out at me because I think he should have testified. Now I really think he should have testified.
And I'm standing there and the verdict comes down. I say, how is that possible? Based off the evidence.
Anytime you get to tell your own story and your side of the story is a huge benefit, and particularly when you can do it in your own words. When you are presented as a caricature, which is exactly what he was presented at trial, it's problematic. I mean, here you have a person who has never been arrested for anything, has never been in any trouble before, and all of a sudden, in the space of 3 weeks or really 48 hours of a verdict, his entire life is turned upside down.
Face, twist her arm behind her back, fracture her middle finger.
Yeah, that did not happen.
They did, in fact, and John Majors, in fact, does relitigate this case. I was surprised at that. I figured that they would go for some broader brushes.
How would you describe that 2-year relationship?
I loved Greg. Our relationship was not healthy.
He went into detail, and it was pretty interesting to watch that. It's really interesting to see. And full disclosure, I used to work for ABC, and I, worked at the time when Disney purchased ABC. I'm familiar with standing outside an edit room when somebody's editing a piece, and particularly crash editing a piece for World News Tonight or something like that. This is really not an example of that. They pre-recorded this piece. It looks like days and days before, and took some time with the editing. So this is not something they rushed together. Somebody had to have thought about what footage they were going to use, how they were going to present the backstory of what happened with Mr. Majors and Miss Jabbari. The reason I bring that up is you'll notice that they use in 2 separate moments the worst pieces of footage for Jonathan Majors. The placing of Miss Jabbari into the car, which was, I think, the whole reason why the jury decided to do what they did. And the footage of Miss Jabbari laying on the floor of Mr. Majors' bathroom after locking him out of his own residence. And of course, ABC, typical of most journalistic outlets, they provide no context as to what led up to that moment. So we don't know anything about the numerous text messages. We don't know anything about the timing of the text messages from Miss Jabbari to her friends in England and Mr. Majors and what transpires right before. We're just seeing a video of her laying there, which of course, for most people paying half attention, that's pretty indicting, right? So at any rate, I thought it was interesting that they actually show the video of him placing Miss Jabbari in the car, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. That's interesting. And then they show this sort of sweeping, fairly brief clip of Miss Jabbari chasing him. And then, of course, Jonathan Majors makes the point that
You watch those videos and you reverse that. And you saw a black man chasing a young white girl down the street, screaming and crying. That man is going to be shot and killed in the streets of New York City.
Majors' defense team shared these photos, which he says show the injuries he received that night, which were deemed inadmissible in court.
And this is so interesting to me. Of all the stories that have been written about Mr. Majors and Ms. Jabbari and this whole incident since March 25, 2023, when it happened, which story do they use and put on the screen? Well, that would be the Rolling Stone story. You can't make it up, right? You can't make it up. Not the New York Times, not Variety, not People, the Rolling Stone story.
The March 2023 incident thrust Majors' dating history into the forefront. A Rolling Stone article back in June detailed multiple allegations of abusive behavior dating back to Majors' relationships in college. Allegations Majors vehemently denies. His attorneys offered past partners to defend him.
Of probably all the stories and all the journalism I read on the Majors case, this story is probably the most questionable. And I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, of lying or anything like that, but I'm just going to say this. I've been in journalism since I was in high school. I was on my high school paper, I was on my college paper. The first real journalism job I had was at ABC News. Then I worked at USA Today. And I own a few media platforms. Okay, but I've also worked in state government in New York, in Virginia, and on the federal level in Washington, D.C. I'm telling you, I don't think I have ever seen a story that has cited more sources, in this case, 40 that we've talked to. We've talked to 40 people, says Rolling Stone, without one of those people being named, not a single person, and then have a trial happen and not one of those people show up at trial and sit on a witness stand. And in the media age that we live in the technology age that we live in, it's extremely unusual because people, what they tend to do is they tend to pop up on Instagram and Facebook or Twitter, maybe even YouTube, but at any rate, they tend to pop up. The other way that they pop up is they pop up in the stories of other journalistic platforms. So when I first saw the story in Rolling Stone that refers to the 40 people that we spoke to since Yale, since Jonathan Majors was in Yale Drama School, I felt like, wow, we're probably going to see one of those 40 people on the stand in court, or we're going to see one of those 40 people in the New York Times or the New York Post or People magazine. And frankly, maybe we don't know it. I don't know. All I know is I have not read anything that would indicate the name of any of the 40 people referred to in the Rolling Stone piece. So as of the 8th of January, 2024, there hasn't been one person. I would love to see one of the 40 people that is referred to in this Rolling Stone piece appear as a person with a name and a face.
He claims he was injured. He points to surveillance video where Grace Jabbari pursued him, chasing him for blocks. She was arrested, but never prosecuted.
I don't know why ABC is acting as if we don't know the answers to these questions. We have photos of Mr. Majors' injuries. Ms. Jabbari was arrested for assault. I mean, so I'm not sure why that wasn't mentioned as a factual thing that is known. Okay, this is not Mr. Majors is saying it. This is the New York City Police Department saying it.
Hi, Grace.
Grace, do you have a comment, Grace?
How do you feel about being charged with a crime?
Having said that, Ms. Davis, the interviewer, gives a very sympathetic mashup of his arguments in this moment. Notice how the Jabbari attorney statement, at least what we're being shown by ABC, perhaps the statement might be longer and they may not have played it all, but notice how the statement does not address anything that is being said in terms of the factual details of this case.
In a statement to ABC News, an attorney for Jabbari said in part, "It is not at all surprising that Mr. Majors continues to take no accountability for his actions," adding, "The timing of these new statements demonstrates a clear lack of remorse for his actions."
And this is interesting because that part of the statement right there where it says a clear lack of remorse for his actions, they're talking directly to Michael Gaffey, the judge in this case, on that one. I mean, that is clear that they're talking to him, and they're talking to anybody who would be involved in an appeal. So they're not dealing in facts. They're dealing in PR, and they're dealing in, let's see how we can get the judge's attention with, oh, he has no remorse. Well, actually, if you look at the entire interview, he actually does have remorse.
Do you feel you're not responsible for her injuries at all?
I shouldn't have been in the car. I shouldn't have stepped out of the relationship. I shouldn't have been in the relationship. If I'm not in the car, none of this is happening.
In most relationships, both parties make mistakes. It's very rare that one party is perfect and the other party is the devil. But in PR, a lot of times what you see, particularly in a case like this, is one side trying to act like they're perfect. So the Jabbari side is trying to act like she was the perfect angel, never made any mistakes, and he's Satan. That's just not generally true. It takes two to tango. I know damn well that a guy did not get into Yale as an airhead. He got into Yale because he's a smart guy. And as you can see, he's contrite in this interview. The cadence of his voice is correct. I've watched a few of his other interviews, though not many, and he tends to have this same sort of style. It doesn't represent some completely different change in the way that he's talking, but his career and frankly his future is on the line in this moment, and I think you got to go big. I think that he should get on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I think he should get on Shannon Sharp. I think he should get on a big, big platform where you're allowed to introduce a lot of nuance. I totally understand getting on GMA. That's 3 million people. And that's the audience that you definitely want to appeal to. Also, the relationship with Disney is there as well. So it's a very interesting thing that he was on that platform for an exclusive interview. And so I thought it was a good job, actually. It could have been, these types of things are so risky, and I totally understand arguments against them, quite frankly. I mean, I totally understand, when people say, well, why is he doing this? And this is before the sentencing. It totally makes sense to make that argument. But I think that you got to go big when your life is on the line at 34 years old. Your reputation is on the line at 34 years old. The stakes are so high. And quite frankly, the evidence is in his favor. And that's the thing that's the most important thing here. What justice represents and what the truth represents is important. Was it justice that we saw in that courtroom? Was it? Or was it an over prosecution by the office of the Manhattan DA as run by Alvin Bragg? I think it was over prosecution. Remember, they started the case with some big truckload of counts that they, of course, had to later drop. They did the same thing to Kevin Porter. They had a bunch of stuff they loaded up on, and then they had to, shed all of that. And of course, in the case of Adam Foss, he was acquitted. So I think that all in all, this was a good idea for Jonathan Majors to do this. Hard though it may be. And really interesting job by Lindsay Davis. And that's it. I'm Lauren Burke. I don't know John Majors. I don't know nothing about. I didn't even know who Kang was until this happened. Shout out to the Marvel fans out there who are covering this. And I don't read comic books. My brother did when I was a kid, but I don't know nothing about Kang and really don't know that much about John Majors. I just think that this story to me illustrates a bigger problem in American society, particularly as it pertains to Black men, how they're treated, the disproportional treatment. You see last night Robert Downey Jr. winning a Golden Globe Award, and you see John Majors going through this. I mean, that really sort of says it all. And yes, I am wearing this Giants hat because the Giants beat the Eagles yesterday. And so good luck.
Sentencing is less than a month away. Legal analysts say it's possible but unlikely that he would get any time behind bars. He's already said.